You won't regret it, I promise. Subscribe. My name is Michael Harris, and for 5 years, silence has been the only thing between my daughter and I. You'd think silence would feel empty, but it isn't. It hums. It echoes. It has corners. It's a house you keep living in after the people have left, touching the furniture as if it might remember you. Chicago winters teach you that, how to live with absences that take shape. I turned 68 in January. That number sounds clinical until you see it in your own handwriting on a prescription label. The mirror doesn't lie, but it does soften things, like an old friend too polite to remind you what you used to be. I keep my beard trimmed now. White makes me look distinguished, Mindy says, though I suspect she means less defeated. Mornings in our kitchen are a ritual of habit and hesitation. The radiator clicks awake before we do. The coffee maker coughs, spits, gives in. Mindy hums off-key to a song from her youth, the kind that still believes in forever. I sit across from her, reading the Tribune without turning a page. The silence between us is practiced, companionable, almost sacred. Then came that morning, the one that split our quiet like a blade. The mail arrived in a tired shuffle through the slot. Bills, catalogs, one envelope resting on top like a promise. My name in looping cursive, my daughter's handwriting. I froze. There are moments that drag time by the collar, and that was one. I held it like a fragile animal. The smell of paper, faint perfume, lavender, and dust almost broke me. Michael? Mindy's voice, the sound of her chair scraping back. She came around the table, squinting. That's not her handwriting, she said, not doubtfully, with the certainty of someone who has watched a man fool himself too many times. I wanted to argue. God help me. I wanted to insist that it was hers. Instead, I looked closer. The loops were too neat, too deliberate, as if someone had studied her hand and rehearsed it. But emotion overrides evidence, doesn't it? We believe what we need to survive the day. Mindy, I said, it's from her. She crossed her arms. She hasn't written you in 5 years. Why would she now? I had no answer that didn't sound pathetic. You have to understand, Natalie wasn't always distant. There was a time she would burst into our room on Sunday mornings, dragging her blanket, asking for pancakes and stories. I can still smell the maple syrup, hear her laugh echoing through the hallway of our old house on Belmont. When she was 15, she told me she wanted to study marine biology. I bought her a fish tank that very week. By 18, she hated the smell of water and refused to speak to me. I still don't know when the tide turned. Open it, Mindy said. The envelope trembled in my hands. Inside, a single page, written in blue ink. Dad, I need money for emergency surgery. Please don't tell anyone. No greeting, no signature, just a plea. The words pulsed off the page like a heartbeat. I read it twice, then a third time. My chest tightened in that old, stupid way, the same way it had when she called from college crying about tuition, and I wired her half my savings without question. I wanted to believe it. I needed to, but Mindy was already shaking her head. This isn't her voice. Look at the way she writes. Don't. Natalie always leaves out the apostrophe. Whoever wrote this paid attention, but not enough. I should have listened. I should have let reason win. Instead, hope, that stubborn, senile hope, marched in with its cane and took the seat at the table. Maybe she's in trouble, I said. Maybe she was embarrassed. Or maybe someone's using her name, Mindy said quietly. Her words landed like sleet, soft but cold enough to burn. We sat there for a while, the letter between us. Outside, the wind howled against the window panes like a trapped spirit. I folded the page carefully, almost reverently, as if mishandling it might erase the last trace of her handwriting, or whoever's imitation it was. Mindy stood, rinsed her mug, and said, "Don't do anything rash." But the truth? I was already planning the drive before she finished the sentence. That afternoon, I left the house. Chicago wore its winter armor, salt-stained streets, gray skies, everything muffled under frost. I passed the frozen lakefront, remembering when Natalie and I used to walk there, feeding ducks even though signs said not to. She'd skip ahead, calling back for me to hurry. I always lagged behind, pretending to be winded just to watch her youth move freely in front of me. Now, 5 years later, I was tracing those same streets alone, a ghost chasing another ghost. Natalie's last known address was in South Shore, a neighborhood that had aged roughly like me. I parked across the street from her apartment complex, watching the windows as dusk settled. The lights blinked on one by one, yellow squares of other people's lives. I imagined her behind one of them, sick, waiting, too proud to call. I told myself that justified everything. The building's hallway smelled of bleach and cigarettes. The elevator was broken. I climbed 4 flights, each step punctuated by the sound of my heartbeat. When she opened the door, her face was pale with confusion. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Her voice still had that upward lilt at the end, the one she'd used when she was little and didn't understand something. "I got your letter," I said, holding it up like evidence. Her brows knitted. "What letter?" "This one." I unfolded it. My hand was shaking again. "You said you needed money for surgery." She stared at the paper, then at me. Her lips parted, closed. Then finally, "I didn't write that. You're making this up." "Why would I?" "You're trying to force me back into your life," she said. Her voice rose, brittle as ice. "You always do this. You create emergencies so you can feel needed again." That one landed deep. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Behind her, the apartment was tidy, warm. A plant thrived on the windowsill. On the counter, a half-eaten bowl of soup. She wasn't sick. She wasn't desperate. She was living, and not poorly. I folded the letter. "I'm sorry," I managed. "For what?" "For believing I mattered enough to be asked." She didn't answer. She just stepped back and closed the door. The click of the latch was louder than I expected. The drive home was slow. Snow had begun to fall, a thin white drizzle that turned the streets into mirrors. Every red light reflected my face. Tired, lined, hollow. Somewhere near Jackson Park, I pulled over. I took the letter out again and stared at it under the dashboard light. The ink looked faintly smudged, as if by a hand that didn't know her rhythm. That's when I saw it, a faint watermark on the corner. Grand Central Motel. I knew that place. Cheap weekly rentals. The kind of joint you paid in cash and left before sunrise. I'd passed it 100 times, pretending not to see. Someone had written that letter from there. Someone who knew enough about me to use her name. For the first time in 5 years, the grief inside me turned into something else. Something with heat. When I got home, Mindy was waiting by the window. "You went, didn't you?" "Yes." "And?" "She said she didn't write it." Mindy sighed, long and deep. "I told you." "I know." She looked at me for a moment, then softened. "So what now?" I didn't answer right away. I looked down at the letter, the motel name barely visible when tilted toward the lamp. "I find out who did." Mindy hesitated. "Michael, I'm not chasing her," I said. "I'm chasing the lie. She didn't stop me this time." That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after she went to bed. The house creaked. The pipes murmured. I traced the motel's faint watermark with my thumb. The air smelled of cold coffee and something metallic. Anticipation, maybe. I used to think forgiveness was the highest form of love. Now I'm not so sure. Maybe it's curiosity, the refusal to die without knowing the truth. I folded the letter once more, set it under the stone paperweight I'd found years ago on a Lake Michigan beach. That stone had been smoothed by waves, worn down but still solid, like me. Then I made a list, one word at the top, motel. It was time to stop waiting for mercy to arrive in envelopes. It was time to open the door myself. A decision sounds clean when you name it. It isn't. It's a tangle of little yeses you say under your breath while you lace your boots and pretend you're still not sure. I told Mindy I was going to the hardware store. She didn't challenge the lie because love, at our age, includes a mercy clause for small deceptions that keep the blood moving. I tucked the letter into my coat pocket and headed for the Grand Central Motel. South Shore wears the past like a coat that won't button. The motel crouches near the tracks, a squat rectangle the color of old nicotine, with a neon sign that hums even in daylight. The R stuttering in GNCETL. The parking lot held 6 cars that all looked like they smoked. Steam rose from a drainage grate as if the building were exhaling its secrets in puffs. Inside, the lobby was a terrarium for bad decisions. Plastic fern, a bulletproof glass window, a bell with no cap on the plunger. The air tasted of metal coffee and the lemon cleaner that never quite wins. Behind the glass, a man watched a small TV tuned to court shows, his face brightened then dimmed by commercials for payday loans. He wore a satin jacket embroidered with an eagle that had lost half its gold thread. "Afternoon," I said, tapping the glass with a knuckle. "I need to ask about some stationery." He blinked at me like I'd asked to borrow his lungs. "We don't do weddings," he said. I slid the letter against the glass. "This paper has your watermark." He squinted. "Read," or pretended to. "People bring their own paper, not usually with your motel's name in the corner." He lifted one shoulder, a shrug's worth of courage. "Clients take pads from rooms. Free country. Is it? Is it? I don't recommend trying to intimidate men in satin jackets if you're almost 70. But I have two advantages. White hair and the kind of face that says I waited somewhere before and can wait again." I put my hand in my pocket and took out a folded 20, then another. The glass made a small tunnel of us. He looked at the money, reached out through the tray, then stopped. "What's the question, Grandpa?" "When did someone last come in asking for extra paper?" "A young person, maybe nervous, maybe smelling like panic." He glanced up at the TV as if wondering whether the judge would approve. He chewed the inside of his cheek. Then he slid the money off the tray with 2 fingers and tucked it beneath the ledger, the size of a school Bible. "Couple days back," he said. "Kid, white, hoodie, kept his head down like he owed the floor an apology. Asked for a fresh pad. Put a 20 on the counter like it hurt him. Wrote in the lobby for a minute. Hand shook." He pantomimed it, an exaggerated tremor. "See his hands?" "Any marks?" I asked. "Tattoo on his thumb," he said. "Dice. Like he only wins in drawings." My mouth went dry. "Ethan has a pair of dice on his left thumb. The dots arranged in a stupid 6 that once made my daughter laugh. I had paid for that tattoo because he said it meant he'd always roll high for her. Do you see how the little kindnesses become the receipts for your later humiliation?" "What room?" I asked. The clerk tipped his head at the sign that said nitrogen monoxide information given about guests. Then he tipped it the other way toward the coffee machine, which held a donation cup with exactly 63 cents in it. I understood the choreography and fed the cup another 5. He told me 214. The stairs smelled like wet carpet and men who had surrendered. The hall lighting belonged to a bus station, harsh, buzzing, unflattering to hope. When I got to 214, I expected the door to mock me. It just stood there, solemn as a dentist. The do not disturb hanger was on the knob. I stood on the cheap runner and listened, nothing but the room's air humming to its own loneliness. "Housekeeping," I said, out of a habit formed 30 years ago when I used to fix the dryer for a landlord friend and learned that a confident voice got you into more rooms than a key. No answer. I pressed my ear to the door until the cold metal dampened my breath. I didn't come to break in. I came to prove to myself I still knew how to move in the world. So I took the over-polished brass handle and turned it. Unlocked. Inside, a bed with a burned comforter, a desk, a pad of stationery with the top torn away, a cup with 2 pens, one hotel branded, one chewed to a soft nub. The air smelled of stale deodorant and wet wool. On the desk, a torn corner of paper, the gray of Gran peeking like a shy name. On the bedspread, a receipt from a place called Lucky Dan's dated the same morning as the letter 3 blocks east. A sports bar that pretended to be a restaurant by adding salad to the menu. I took my phone out and snapped a photo of the receipt. The motel pad had indented impressions from whatever had been written and torn away. I tilted the paper toward the window and saw the faint ghost of letters loopy D's, a long Y. My stomach gave that canyon drop you get when an old certainty breaks. He had practiced my daughter's hand here. He had rehearsed her voice over a bedspread that smelled like older men's sweat. At the trash can, my age betrayed me. I knelt, something popped, and I cursed softly into the smell of disposable cups and cheap coffee. At the bottom, wet and flattened by someone else's heel, I found a paper sleeve from a phone card. On it, a number written twice, then rewritten with a darker pen. My fingers trembled in a way that made me think of the clerk's pantomime. I took a photo, then slid the sleeve into my coat pocket, as if tucking away a relic bone. I wiped my fingerprints from everything I'd touched, because shame makes you want to leave no oils behind. Back at the front desk, the clerk didn't look up from his TV. "Find Jesus in there?" he asked. "Found someone practicing their handwriting," I said. "Wedding then," he said, deadpan. "Something like that." I put another 5 in the cup. "If the kid comes back, tell him his father stopped by." "His what?" "You heard me." He looked at me differently, as if a new organ had formed in my chest and was beating loud enough to be heard through the glass. "I don't do family," he said. "Me neither," I said, and left. Lucky Dan's pretends it doesn't know the day of the week. Inside, the dark blinds, half the afternoon. The televisions do the rest. It smelled like onion rings and the kind of armpit that belongs to men who can't quit. The waitress, a woman with a compass tattoo at her wrist, set a water down without asking and said, "You look like you've come to forgive or to fight." "Menu?" "Neither," I said. "I'm looking for someone." She glanced toward the end of the bar where a knot of men hunched like punctuation marks. "Aren't we all, honey?" I showed her the receipt photo. "Someone ran a tab here the morning of the 23rd. Bought takeout. Did you see who signed for it?" She studied the phone, unimpressed by my tech. Then she handed it back like a court summons. "We don't have tabs in the morning. Men pay cash for shame. Who are you?" "A father," I said, and thought how often that sentence had been both shield and spear in my life. He used my daughter's name. She softened an inch. "You're Michael," she said. The room tilted. I hadn't told her my name. "How?" "She came in here a few times. The way kids do when they want a public place to feel private. Told me you like the coconut pie, even though you complain it's too sweet." Natalie, with her soft betrayals of trivia. She dishes out kindness the way I salt pasta water. A handful, thoughtless, transformative. My throat closed. "Do you remember the guy?" I asked, keeping my voice in that polite range older men use so no one has to chase us out. She nodded at the knot of men. One of them, a thin fellow with a cap that said "Pay Up," turned his head so I could see the dice tattoo on his thumb. Except it wasn't Ethan. This man was older, with the dry, leathery look of someone who'd long ago organized his sins in routine. He noticed me noticing him. I noticed the way the other men went still the way men do when they are recalculating the odds of a conversation. "I don't want trouble," I told the waitress. She half smiled. I think trouble thinks the same thing. I carried my water to the far end of the bar and let my body learn the stools. Pay Up finished his beer, set it down exactly on the ring left by the last one, and sauntered over with the not quite friendly gait of a man who considers every greeting alone. "You looking," he said. Not yet a question. "For a kid with a tattoo like yours," I said. He lifted his left thumb, admired the dice as if they still surprised him. "Popular pattern." "I paid for the original," I said, and watched the small wince he couldn't hide. News travels in small circles. A father's repayment takes different forms. "You're the old man," he said, and now we were having the conversation he'd hoped to avoid. "What's your name?" I asked. He thought about lying and settled for economy. "Tobin," I said, tasting it like a shot. "You friends with Ethan?" "We play cards," he said. "We're friends with the same debts." I nodded. "He wrote me a letter." "Did he now?" Tobin said, a smile and 3 dreadful syllables. "He wrote it in your motel. Is that right?" he said, though we both knew he'd passed through 214 more times than the housekeeper. I slid the receipt photo across the bar top. "He didn't touch it." I slid the phone card sleeve, the written number facing up. He still didn't touch it. He looked instead at my hands. White hair or not, hands tell you if a man is here to lie or to leave. Mine said I had stacked lumber, that I had held babies, that I would hold this too. "I don't want the boys in the back hearing we're sharing poetry," he said. "Come smoke with me." "I don't smoke," I said. "Me neither," he said, standing. In the alley behind Lucky Dan's, the wind scraped the dumpsters and made a thin instrument of the metal. Tobin lit a cigarette, inhaled without pulling. Let the smoke push blue into the gray air. "You know he's no good," he said. "I know he's married to my daughter," I said. "That's another kind of no good," he said. "More expensive. Where's he getting the money?" I asked. From anywhere you can teach to bleed, he said. From whoever wants to believe they're helping. From fathers. He flicked ash, watched it fall with the satisfaction of a tiny god. No offense. All offense taken, I said. Where is he now? Changing phones, Tobin said. Changing numbers. He changes everything but the luck. He glanced at my coat. You a cop? I'm a father, I said again, and the echo bored me even as it braced me. He weighed this. Men like Tobin have a private scale in their heads. Favors on one side, future trouble on the other, and vanity as the counterweight. You didn't hear it from me, he said, and gave me a location. A betting parlor on 79th that dressed up as a tax prep office called Accurate Refunds. He laughed at the sign. That's the funniest thing on that block, he said. I stuck out my hand. He considered it like a sandwich from a stranger, then shook. His thumb pressed my palm. The dice felt like a brand through skin. Tell him, I said, next time he forges a hand, he should learn the apostrophes. Tobin squinted, then grinned. That's good, he said, as if I'd told a joke at my own funeral. You might survive this. I don't want to survive it, I said. I want to finish it. Same thing depending on the day. Back home for an hour, just long enough to change into a warmer coat and collect the part of my courage that had thawed. Mindy watched me zip up like I was buttoning myself into a story she had already read and did not care for. Don't go alone, she said. I'm always alone when it's about her, I said, which was unkind and true and should not be said aloud. She flinched. The look on her face added a brick to the load I was dragging around. Call Kaisha, she said. If you won't take another person, at least carry the law in your pocket. She was right. I called my lawyer while I walked, the cold making a metronome of my breath. Kaisha answered on the third ring. I told her everything in the clipped way men do when the urgency embarrasses them. Send me photos, she said. And your location. If you don't text in 2 hours, I have a file full of grievances I can turn into a miracle. Are you a miracle worker now? No, she said, but I file paperwork like I am. I loved her then in the way you love people who practice competence near your particular chaos. I sent her the receipt, the phone card sleeve, the address of Accurate Refunds, and a photo of my face because I wanted a witness to the last version of me who hadn't done something irrevocable. The betting parlor, disguised as a tax place, had hand-lettered signs in the window that said, "We fight for your money and big returns. Ask about advance." A woman in a leopard coat sat behind a desk with a plastic fern that was more honest than the rest of the decor. Behind the bead curtain, I could hear the small electronic burp of betting slips printing and a sound like men losing weight. Taxes? The woman asked without interest. Refunds, I said. Who sent you? Lucky Dan, I said, and watched the way the name rearranged her posture. Looking for a kid named Ethan. Dice on his thumb. She tested a smile that failed its test. We don't use names. She tapped a discreet sign. No soliciting. Nitrogen monoxide police. Nitrogen monoxide husbands. I'm a father, I said for what felt like the 1000th time that day, then wished I could unsay it because it sounded like a tick. Tell him Michael Harris is here with a letter in his pocket. She disappeared behind the beads. Voices rose, dropped. The sound of a chair scraping. Then he appeared. The man I'd first known as a laugh in my kitchen, later as a shrug in my living room, finally as a silence across a table where my daughter ate without tasting. Michael, he said, spreading his hands like he was innocent of owning them. He'd lost weight. Guilt burns calories. He had a scar near his jaw that I didn't recognize luck changing shape. The dice tattoo winked as he reached for a handshake I let die in the space between us. You forged my daughter's hand, I said. Isn't that what marriage is? He said, and I admired the bravado of a drowning man calling the river wet. You wrote I shouldn't tell anyone, I said. That's how cowards edit families. He shrugged. The shrug said, teach me something I can sell. I needed help, so you asked me by stealing her name. He looked past me at the door. The woman in leopard coat leaned on her elbow and examined her nails. Behind the beads, the printer hiccuped another bet into existence. You going to hit me? He asked. No, I said. I'm going to make a list. I took out my phone. 1. You admit you wrote it. 2. You tell me who told you to. 3. You tell me how deep you're in. Lists, he said. You're adorable. He tried to shoulder past me. I stepped into him, not violent, just firm like a father in a baseball field, keeping a boy from walking into traffic. He could have swung then. He didn't. Instead, he slid his eyes to the woman. Bonita, he said, call Marcus. You don't want Marcus, she said without looking up. You want to answer the questions. He sighed. Even his breath was counterfeit. Fine, I wrote it, he said. No one told me to. I thought he flicked a glance at my coat pocket, meaning I would send the money without drama. How deep? I asked. Not as deep as your love for me, he said. Tell me the number. He did. It was a number that made my knees feel suddenly too small for their job. I'd been poor enough times in my life to know what numbers mean to the men who hold them. This one had already given him a new name in certain rooms. You have a week, I said, though I had no authority to pronounce weeks. And you will not speak to Natalie until I speak to her first. You can't. I can, I said. You forget what I can do because I don't brag about it. Because I'm old enough to know that the loudest men are the weakest ones. Watch me be quiet and effective. He tried the smile that had once charmed my daughter into forgiving overdue. Rent and a lie about a car that someone had scraped. The smile broke against my face and fell at his feet like ice. You're not scary, he said. I'm not trying to be, I said. I'm trying to be precise. That's when a hand came through the bead curtain and pressed a phone to Ethan's palm. He stared at the screen, and something in his face drained like a tide. He turned it so I could see. A photo of me in the motel room, kneeling at the trash can, my coat collar up, old man caught in the act of wanting the truth. Next time, a text under the picture read, knock. Who took that? I asked the room. It's a room, Benita said, with a shrug that contained the whole city. Rooms have eyes. Ethan looked at me with something like awe and something like pity. You're in over your head, he said. That's the wrong preposition, I said. I'm in at the neck, and I don't plan on drowning. I put my phone away. I left without turning my back on him because even forgiveness prefers a man who can advance and retreat in good order. On the sidewalk, the cold took me into its mouth like a mint. Keisha's text arrived before I could text her. Well, I wrote back. Found him. He confessed. It's bad. She responded. Come by the office. Bring the letter. Bring your stubbornness. I'll file it as evidence. I almost smiled. Before I could step off the curb, a sedan rolled slow to the corner and idled. The passenger window lowered an inch. A voice I didn't know said, Mr. Harris, did you get the letter? The window rolled up before I could answer. The car slid away into the watercolor afternoon. I stood there with my breath making labor in the cold and realized that the letter wasn't the first move. It was the middle. I looked down at my hand. My palm still held the ghost of the dice tattoo from Tobin's Shake, like luck had pressed a dirty thumb into me. The stone in my coat pocket knocked against my ribs when I turned toward Keisha's office. An old tide clocking a new shore. Cliffhanger enough? Good, because as I reached the corner, my phone buzzed again, this time from Natalie. I heard you went to see him. Don't ever do that again, unless you're ready to hear what I did. When Natalie's text arrived, I stopped in the middle of the crosswalk. Cars honked. Someone yelled. I didn't care. Her message was short, and that made it heavier. Don't ever do that again, unless you're ready to hear what I did. There are words that are both threat and confession. Those were 4 of them. I didn't answer. I pocketed the phone and kept walking toward Keisha's office, counting my steps like I was back in the service, marching toward a decision I already regretted. The cold pressed its palm against my chest. Keisha's office sits above a nail salon that never seems to close. The stairs smell of acetone and cheap courage. When I reached her door, she was waiting, coat still on, scarf draped like a question mark. Her expression said she'd already guessed half the story. Let me see it, she said. I handed her the letter, now wrinkled, carrying the faint odor of motel air. She smoothed it on her desk and took photos for the file. Then she leaned back, eyes sharp behind her glasses. You found Ethan? I found something wearing his voice. That's usually worse. She stood, poured 2 coffees from the little French press she keeps on the shelf. The room filled with the smell of burnt almonds. So what's the plan, Michael? You going to scare him straight or bury him legal? I don't know yet, I said. Maybe both. Good. Start by not getting yourself shot. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside, copies of the changes we'd made to my will. Clauses protecting Mindy, and now Natalie too, from debts or coercion. Kaisha never forgets a detail. I also filed a provisional restraining notice against Ethan's known creditors. It won't last long, but it buys time. I nodded. You think he'll come after me? No, she said. But men who owe money do strange math, and you're the variable they underestimate. She had a way of flattering me without softening the truth. I left her office with the letter back in my pocket, the wind louder than before. I didn't go home. Not yet. I drove west instead, through Bronzeville, past the boarded windows and snow-choked alleys where I used to know every shortcut. At a red light, I saw a father teaching his son to throw snowballs. Both of them laughing so hard they looked unafraid of time. I envied that sound. Natalie had said what I did. It echoed. When I reached her building, the hallway was darker than before. I didn't knock. I texted instead. I'm downstairs. 5 minutes. If not, I leave. She appeared before I finished typing, coat thrown over pajamas, hair tied up in the messy way she used to do before exams. She looked older and younger at once, like grief had sanded her down to the girl beneath the woman. Why can't you stay out of it? She said, arms crossed, not quite angry enough to slam the door. Because it's already in me, I said. Because you sent that message. Her jaw tensed. You shouldn't have gone to him. He's dangerous. Then why are you with him? She looked past me, toward the street, where headlights carved silver lines through the snow. Because I thought I could fix him. I almost laughed. The family disease. She half smiled at that, but her eyes were wet. He said he'd stop gambling, that he'd sell the car, pay the debts. But when it got worse, She stopped herself, shaking her head. You don't want to hear this. I do, I said. All of it. She looked at me like someone deciding whether to reopen a wound that had scabbed too early. He took out loans in my name. Small ones at first, then bigger. He said he'd forged your letter because he knew you'd pay. I didn't know until it was done. There it was, the truth. Not a dagger, but a slow knife turning. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because you'd hate me, she said softly. I could never. Don't, she interrupted. Don't give me absolutions you haven't earned. We stood there, the air between us fogging with every breath. Somewhere down the hall, a door shut. A baby cried. Life went on, cruelly indifferent to our theater. Does he know you told me? I asked. No. Good. I took a breath. You need to stay with us for a few days. She hesitated. And say what to Mom? The truth. Or something close enough to it. She looked at me, measuring the distance between pride and safety. Okay, she said finally. I felt something loosen in my chest. The smallest mercy, the kind you don't trust yet. At home, Mindy was at the sink when we came in. She didn't speak. She just wiped her hands on a towel and opened her arms. Natalie went to her like gravity had been restored. Watching them hug, I felt like an intruder in my own redemption. I'll make tea, Mindy said, and disappeared into the kitchen. Natalie sat at the table, staring at her hands. He'll find out, she said. He always does. Then we'll be ready, I said. Kaisha's helping. You went to her? I go to people who know what to do, I said. That's new for me. She looked up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Maybe respect. You're not angry? Of course I am, but not at you. Then who? At the man who made you believe you were responsible for his ruin. Her lip trembled. I was, though. No, I said. He picked his weapon. You just stood too close. Mindy returned with 3 mugs, steam rising like surrender. We drank in silence. The heat from the tea fogged the window, and in the blur of condensation I could almost imagine we were a family again, intact, unruined. Then my phone buzzed. A text, no name attached. You shouldn't have taken her home, Mr. Harris. That wasn't smart. I showed them both. Mindy covered her mouth. Natalie went pale. He's watching, she whispered. I stood, the chair scraping loud against the tile. Then let him. The next day, I parked outside accurate refunds again. I waited. Ethan would come, men like him always do. The street was quiet, except for a kid on a bike, the tires crunching over snow. After an hour, the door opened and Ethan stepped out, cigarette dangling from his mouth. He looked thinner, but more dangerous. Desperation adds angles to a man's face. I followed him. Not subtly. I wanted him to know. Down 79th, through an alley, across a parking lot into a laundromat where he pretended to read a newspaper. I sat 2 machines away. "You shouldn't text my daughter," I said, voice low. He didn't look up. "She's my wife. She's my blood." He flicked ash onto the tile. "You think you can scare me because you're old?" "I don't think it. I know it. Because old men don't bluff." He smirked. "You can't touch me. You're the kind of guy who writes checks, not threats." I leaned closer. "You're right. So here's a check. Made out to your creditors. When I deliver it, I'll tell them you forged my name and used my daughter's hand to do it. You'll be lucky if they only break your pride." That wiped a smirk clean. "You wouldn't," he said. "Try me." He sat back, exhaling through his nose. "You think you're clever. You're just lonely. Lonely men live longer than dead gamblers," I said. "You've got 1 week. After that, you'll wish I'd stayed lonely." He didn't follow me when I left, and that worried me more than if he had. That night, Natalie couldn't sleep. I heard her pacing the hallway, whispering on the phone. I waited until she hung up, then stepped out. "Who was it?" I asked. "Ethan," she said. "He said he's sorry, that he'll fix it." "And you believe him?" "I don't know what I believe anymore." "Then believe me," I said. "He's going to get worse before he stops pretending." She didn't argue. She just nodded, looking smaller than she had in years. I went to my study and sat at the desk. The letter lay under the stone, same as before, but it looked different now, like a photograph that had changed meaning. I unfolded it and studied the loops, the forged tenderness. That's when I noticed something new. Faint pencil lines beneath the ink, as if someone had traced the words first. On the bottom corner, a smudge shaped like a thumbprint. I held it under the lamp. The print was partial, blurred, but enough to compare. I opened the small drawer where I'd kept one of Natalie's childhood drawings, a family portrait in crayon, signed with her full name. Her thumbprint, in purple paint, decorated the corner. She'd been 6. The prints didn't match. Whoever forged her hand had also forged her fingerprint. Someone meticulous. Someone who knew I'd looked too closely. I stared at that letter for a long time, the paper heavy with deceit. Then I folded it back, slid it beneath the stone again, and whispered, not to anyone living, "You taught me patience, Eliza. I'll use it." By morning, I had a plan. I drove to Keisha's again and told her everything. The motel, the bar, Ethan, the laundromat, the second threat, the forged fingerprint. She listened without interrupting, her pen scratching a soft rhythm against the pad. "Michael," she said finally, "you're being stalked. Maybe. Or tested." She looked at me the way doctors do before bad news. "You can't keep playing hero. These men aren't sentimental." "I'm not playing," I said. She sighed. "Then at least let me make it legal." We filed for a restraining order that afternoon. It wouldn't hold if Ethan kept his distance, but it gave us paper armor. Keisha promised to contact the police if another message came. That night, Mindy cooked stew the way she does when she's afraid. Too much salt, too much heart. Natalie helped her, and for a few hours, the house felt alive again. But the moment I stepped outside to take the trash, I saw them. 2 men in a sedan parked across the street, engine running, watching. I stood there, trash bag in hand, until one of them rolled down the window. He didn't speak. He just smiled, a smile that promised continuation. Then they drove off, slow and deliberate. When I went back inside, Mindy asked what was wrong. I lied, said I'd just slipped on the ice. But my hands were shaking when I reached for her. "Michael," she whispered, "what are we going to do?" "End it," I said. "But how do you end a lie that's learned to walk?" I didn't know yet. All I knew was that Ethan wasn't the only one playing a game, and the next move, mine, had to be louder than silence. It happened 3 nights later, or maybe it had been happening for years, and that night was just when the thread finally tore. The first thing I noticed was the sound, the kind of knocking that doesn't belong to neighbors. Slow, deliberate, each thud spaced like punctuation. I was in my chair by the window, pretending to read, the letter still on the table beside me, when the second knock came. Mindy looked up from the couch. "Don't," she said softly, already knowing. But I opened the door anyway. Natalie stood there in the snow. Her face looked hollowed, eyes rimmed red. She wasn't wearing gloves. Behind her, the streetlight threw halos in the flakes. She shivered once, then twice, and finally said, "Dad, I can't do this anymore." Mindy appeared behind me, instinctively moving toward her, but Natalie stepped forward and grabbed my sleeve instead. "He's here," she said. "Ethan." He followed me. I pulled her inside and locked the door. The sound of her breath filled the entryway like the hiss of something newly alive. "Where is he now?" I asked. "I don't know. I ran." Mindy took her coat. "Sit down." "You're shaking." Natalie sank into a chair, her fingers gripping the armrest like it might float her. Her voice was small. "He found the letter in your desk, the real one. He knows you didn't give him the money. He said I embarrassed him." "Did he touch you?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. She shook her head. "No, not yet. There's a word for that kind of not yet. It isn't safety, it's suspension. The waiting room of fear." I went to the hall closet and pulled out the old baseball bat I'd kept since coaching her little league team. The wood was nicked, the handle worn smooth by the years. It had hit more softballs than skulls, but that night I didn't know which history it would repeat. "Michael," Mindy said, her tone not pleading but commanding, "don't make this worse." "He made it worse the moment he forged her name," I said. I checked the window. Across the street, the same sedan sat idling under the lamppost, two shadows inside. The car looked different now that I knew its eyes were aimed at my house. I took out my phone and called Keisha. It went straight to voicemail. I left a message anyway. "He's here. Send someone before I do something I can't untie." Then I turned back to Natalie. "You stay here with your mother." "Where are you going?" she asked. "To talk to him." "Dad, please." "I won't start anything," I lied. The street was empty, except for snow hissing under the tires of the sedan. I approached slowly, the bat hidden behind my leg. The driver's window rolled down halfway. A thin hand emerged, holding nothing, but meaning everything. "You're a hard man to help," said the voice from inside. It wasn't Ethan. The voice was older, raspier, soaked in cigarettes, and the confidence of someone who'd survived too long. "Tobin," I said, recognizing the profile, the dice tattoo on the thumb gripping the wheel. He grinned, the shape of a man enjoying his own irony. "You're quick. Where's Ethan?" "Inside your daughter's head, mostly," he said. "She's the one who called him. Said she wanted to talk. Said she'd come alone." He didn't believe her, so he sent us to make sure she didn't change her mind. "She's here," I said. "Safe," he shrugged. "Safe's a slippery word." "Then define it," I said, stepping closer. The bat's weight felt suddenly foolish, like the costume of a younger man. "You protecting him?" "I'm protecting the debt," he said. "That's what loyalty looks like in our business. I can pay it." He laughed, a single sharp bark that fogged the air. "You think it's that simple?" "It is for me." He studied my face, maybe wondering whether old men could bluff after all. "Even if you do, there's a bigger one behind it. You pay me. Marcus comes knocking. You pay Marcus. There's someone after him. Money's a wheel. You spin it. It spins you back." I took another step. "Then maybe we take the wheel off." Something flickered behind his eyes. Amusement, respect, maybe even pity. "You want to make this go away, Harris? Fine. There's one move left. Bring Ethan in. Make him sign. That ends your part." "Sign what?" "A statement. Says he acted alone. Says you were the victim. We'll sell the debt to another buyer. Clear hands. You walk away. And him?" Tobin's grin thinned. "We'll see what his hands are worth." I didn't like the sound of that. "Where?" He gave me an address. A warehouse on 95th. "Midnight. Don't be early. Don't be late. And if I am?" He smiled wider. Then we stopped believing in forgiveness. I went back inside. Mindy was pacing. Natalie sat on the couch, a blanket over her knees. "Where were you?" Mindy snapped. "You can't just—" "He's not here," I said. "But I know where he will be." "Michael," she said, voice trembling now, "you can't keep doing this." "Let the police." "The police don't stop debts," I said. "They just document." Natalie looked up. "He won't go if you tell him to. He doesn't listen to anyone." "Then you'll have to make him," I said. "How?" "By choosing which side of forgiveness you want to live on." She looked confused, but there was no time for explaining. Midnight wasn't far. I told her to rest, to stay with Mindy no matter what. Then I left again, the snow thicker now, swallowing the city's edges. The warehouse on 95th looked like every place built to hide regret. Corrugated walls, one flickering floodlight, footprints leading in and none leading out. Tobin was already there, leaning against a rusted sedan, cigarette glowing like a false beacon. "He's inside," Tobin said. "Brought his pride with him." "What's this really about?" I asked. He exhaled smoke. "You think it's about money. It's about humiliation. The boy borrowed from men he wanted to impress. Lost it all trying to prove he wasn't his wife's charity case. That boy's name is Ethan. That boy's problem is Ethan," he said. "You can fix your daughter, maybe. You can't fix what he sees in the mirror." I went in. The warehouse smelled of oil and cold metal. Somewhere a radio played faint jazz, tinny through bad speakers. Ethan stood near a stack of crates, coat half sipped, hand shaking. When he saw me, he smirked. "You brought backup?" "No," I said. "You already have enough shadows." He looked older than the last time I'd seen him, jaw tight, eyes restless. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," I said. "But here we are." He glanced at the door behind me. "It told you I forged the letter?" "They didn't have to. You just did." He looked away. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." "What did you mean, then?" "That I'd send money and never ask why. That your wife would thank you for lying in her handwriting. She said you'd never forgive her if you knew what she'd done." "What's she done?" I asked. He hesitated. "She borrowed too, before I did, to cover bills. Didn't tell you. When she couldn't pay, I thought I'd handle it." I blinked. "So you both lied to protect me. Call it that if it helps," he said bitterly. I took a step closer. "You think deceit counts as love?" He laughed, short and empty. "You tell me. You've been lying to your wife for years." That one landed. A clean hit. Maybe he was right. Maybe silence is just an older man's version of deceit. He reached for something in his pocket. I thought it was a gun. It wasn't. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is the statement they want me to sign. Says I acted alone. Says you didn't know. But if I do, they'll sell my debt to a worse crowd." "Then don't sign," I said. "They'll kill me if I don't." "They'll kill you anyway, Ethan. You can't bargain with men who rent their mercy by the hour." He looked down. "Then what do I do?" And there it was, the moment I hadn't expected. He was asking me for help, not forgiveness. Help, as if the words still fit between us. I thought of Natalie asleep on our couch, Mindy waiting in fear, Kaisha checking her phone for my message. I thought of my mother's stone paperweight on the table, the one that kept the forged letter from flying away. Then I realized what had to happen. "Give me the statement," I said. He hesitated, then handed it over. The paper was thin, already creased from his indecision. I took my pen, the same one I used to sign my will, and wrote my own name beneath his. Then I added one line under witness. "Michael Harris, father of the accused, author of the forgiveness." "What are you doing?" he asked. "Making the truth ours again." The warehouse door opened. Tobin entered, his breath a gray ribbon. "Time's up," he said. I held up the signed page. "It's done." He took it, scanned the lines, then frowned. "You signed it too?" "Yes," I said. "Now if it goes public, so do I, which means nobody wins." He stared at me for a long time. Then, slowly, he smiled. "You're a strange man, Harris." "I'm a father," I said. He pocketed the page and turned to leave. "The debt's gone. The boy's yours again. Do what you want with him." When he was gone, the silence felt like the aftermath of thunder. Ethan looked at me, eyes wide. "Why'd you do that?" "Because someone has to end the game," I said. "And because I'm tired of pretending revenge feels like justice." He didn't answer. He just sank down on a crate, shaking. "You go home to her," I said. "You tell her everything, and then you leave. If you come near this family again, I'll stop forgiving you." He nodded slowly. "You really think she'll forgive me?" "No," I said. "But maybe she'll start forgiving herself." It was nearly 2 a.m. when I got home. Mindy and Natalie were asleep on the couch, the TV flickering on mute. The letter was still under the stone on the table. I sat beside it, poured a glass of water, and watched the snow fall outside. When Natalie stirred, she reached out blindly, hand finding mine. "Is it over?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. "But don't ask me how." She exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and grief. "Did you hurt him?" "No," I said. "Not the way he expected." Then she did something that broke me quietly. She leaned her head on my shoulder, like she used to as a child. "I'm sorry," she murmured, "for the years we lost." "So am I said. "But maybe we can start losing them slower." The house creaked. The radiator hissed. And somewhere beneath the hum of the city, I thought I heard something closing. Not a door, not a chapter, but the kind of silence that doesn't hurt anymore. I woke before the heat came on, before the city remembered its name. The house was still, performing innocence. The television in the living room blinked its blue apology. Mindy and Natalie were asleep where exhaustion had dropped them, and the old baseball bat leaned against the wall like a prop from a drama that had closed. Do you know that hour, when your body hasn't chosen a mood yet and the world is willing to let you lie? I sat at the kitchen table with the stone paperweight and the forged letter between my hands and felt, for the first time in a long time, unfrightened by my own thinking. Forgiveness, I used to believe, was a door you walked through once. This is false. It's a turnstile. You can stand there all day letting it bump your hip until you decide which side of the station you're meant to be on. I'd done something strange and quiet at that warehouse. I'd stepped between my daughter and the mathematics of men, but don't let me pretend nobility. I also stepped away from the cheap thrill of vengeance. That ache you sometimes savor, I put it down. It tried to crawl back up my sleeve. Mindy woke with a start on the couch and came to find me. She poured water, set the glass in front of me, and did not speak for a while. The kitchen light made her hair look like a halo that had gotten practical. "You're here," she said finally, which was less a question than a benediction. "I didn't break anything," I said. "You didn't fix everything either," she answered, not unkind. "That's the new me," I said. "Partial repairs." She pulled out a chair, sat opposite, and placed her hand on the letter the way a nurse checks a pulse. "You could have been killed. I could have killed something in me that I still need," I said. It seemed a fair trade at 2 a.m. Less so now. She eyed the stone. "You and that rock," she said, a smile climbing onto her face despite itself. "You ever going to tell me why you keep it?" I told her again, because repetition is how the old keep their stories oiled. Lake Michigan in March, my mother's funeral week. The wind on the pier like a mean cousin. The small act of picking up something worked and smoothed by time, thinking that meant I would be too. I said it and watched the memory obey me. I have learned that the objects we keep are the arguments we are trying to win. By 8, the radiator had found its rhythm and Natalie had slept herself back into a human kind of calm. She came into the kitchen like a person entering her own childhood home for the first time in years, hands unsure where to reach. Eyes choosing the safest chair. Mindy plugged in the kettle and hummed the same off-key hymn she reserves for triage. We did not say Ethan's name. We said tea, and would you like jam, and it might warm up later. Language as gauze. "You wrote something last night," Natalie said suddenly, looking at the legal pad near my elbow. "I always do," I said, "when I'm trying not to lie." "About me?" "About me," I said, "though you haunt every sentence." She reached for the pad, then stopped. "You can keep your privacy," she said, a sentence I never expected to hear from my daughter. "I've been hoarding it," I admitted. Privacy masquerading as dignity. I slid the pad over anyway. She read a line or two, her mouth doing the little frown it did at 11 when math turned unkind. Then she set it down and pressed her palm to the stone. "I thought forgiveness would feel like a parade," she said, eyes on the rock. "It feels like carrying groceries when your arms are already sore." "That's still dinner," I said. She smiled with half her mouth, the bravest part. "Isn't this wrong?" she asked, still testing me. "Letting him go like that?" "Maybe, but wrong in the right direction." I leaned forward. "There's something else you should know. Tobin didn't cancel the world. He canceled one slice of it. Men like him least mercy. It comes due. So it's not over," she said. "Not a question. It's never over," I said. "It just changes billing cycles." We laughed, all three of us, because jokes are the lever we use to pry mornings open. Then I stood and said the thing I'd been carrying in my teeth since the warehouse. "I need to visit your grandmother." "Which one?" Natalie asked, though she knew. "Eliza," I said. "Oak Woods." "Want company?" Mindy asked, already collecting her scarf. "Not this time," I said. "This one's a confession I owe a ghost." The cemetery held the city's quiet in a careful dish. The snow there had the good manners to stay beautiful. I found my mother's stone modest, clean, the dates neat as a ledger, and pressed my gloved hand to her name, as if checking a door for heat. I lied to Mindy. I told the marble because the wind would tell her anyway. Not last night, for years. Not a scandal. The small lie of being fine when I wasn't. She had taught me thrift. In money, in words, in self-pity. I had overlearned it. Do you do that? Turn a lesson into a costume and forget the body beneath? I'm loosening the belt, I said. I'm going to spend a little feeling in public. A crow clacked in a leafless tree like an old typewriter. I took that as permission. I told her everything. How I had thought love meant lifting everyone. How I'd confused usefulness for worth. How I'd built my identity on checks signed in rooms where no one looked me in the eye. I'm embarrassing myself, Ma, I said. But it's honest. That was always your price of admission. On the way out, the groundskeeper nodded at me with the simple fraternity of men near the same bend in the river. I nodded back and felt, briefly, enrolled in a club that didn't ask for dues beyond survival. Back in Hyde Park, I stopped at the bank. The manager knows me by my winter coat and the habit I have of needing a chair. Mr. Harris, she said, what can we do for you today? I want to open a fund, I said. A small one. For girls at Natalie's old school who want to study accounting. I paused. In my mother's name, Eliza? She asked, reading the form. That's right, I said. She counted corners to make ends meet. Let's teach some kids to count something better. I thought of the folder I'd slid across to Ethan in Chapter 6, as if time were a neighbor I could borrow sugar from. We weren't there yet, but the scaffolding matters. Paperwork is humbling. It insists you line your chaos up in boxes and print your name as if it were a reliable instrument. When I signed, my hand trembled, and I steadied it with the other, an old duet. We can start with this, I told the manager, sliding a check that represented a decade of small economies and one good year when the consulting gigs arrived on time. It wasn't an empire. It was a beginning. At home, Mindy met me at the door, the way wives do when they've been counting the minutes out loud in their heads. Where'd you go after the bank? She asked. To buy breath, I said, and kissed her forehead. I told my mother, I'm going to stop auditioning for the part of the uncomplaining man. She approved, Mindy said. She never liked your performance. We ate leftovers at the kitchen island stew 2 days improved. Bread warmed, butter soft. The simple sacrament of food you don't have to justify. We were almost done when the doorbell rang. My body did what bodies do now. The heart lit a flare. The shoulders squared. The hand went for the old bat that wasn't there. Mindy touched my sleeve. I'll get it, she said. And I let her because marriage is also about sharing the stage directions. It was the mail. Not a letter God is kinder than. A small padded envelope with no return address. The handwriting blockish, corrected. Inside, the motel's pad of paper, untouched, except for the top page where someone had written, I'm sorry, in careful block letters, like a school penmanship lesson. No signature. A post-it stuck to the back, for your windowsill archive. You were right about the apostrophes. I laughed, the sound landing wrong in the room. Mindy read it, then handed it to Natalie, who had come to the doorway at the bell like an echo. She pressed her lips together. He thinks this is cute, she said. He thinks this is surrender, I said. It's neither. It's a man learning to spell remorse. Are you really going to keep it? Mindy asked, meaning the pad, meaning the evidence of someone's small turn. Yes, I said. A lie transformed is still part of the record. Here's the revelation that slid into me then. Not like a revelation at all, but like a chair I finally sat in. I had spent years demanding records from the wrong department. Approval, gratitude, apology receipts I kept waiting for from my daughter, as if I were auditing her heart. The only ledger I control is the one with my own name on top. The day's entries were clear. A visit to the dead, a fund for the living, a pad of paper saved from the motel's knitstand to my windowsill. Modest things. Durable. That evening we watched the Bulls lose beautifully because that is their charm. Between quarters, Mindy rested her feet in my lap. Natalie sat on the floor with her back to the couch and let her head find my knee the way a daughter does when the history is complicated and the present is simple. Somewhere between my ankle and my resolve, the stiffness eased. "Dad," she said during a commercial for a truck that could climb a mountain and also grill, "why didn't you let them hurt him?" "Because pain is a poor tutor," I said. "It makes quick learners and bad students." I wanted the lesson to last. I hesitated. Also because I recognize myself in, and it's hard to break what looks like a younger version of your worst instincts. "You are nothing like him," she said too fast. "I've been a liar," I said. "The kind who hides behind silence and calls it noble." I turned to Mindy. "I'm sorry for every time I said I'm fine when I was just tired of being seen." Mindy's eyes went glossy then, but she did not let the tears fall. She is stingy with that currency. "Thank you," she said. "It's worth money, you know." "Not as much as you," I said, and she nudged my shin with her toe like we were younger. Later, when the house rested again, I took the new pad and the old letter to my little archive in the windowsill, the hollow behind the old wood where drafts used to come in. I eased the stone aside, tucked the pad beneath, then replaced the weight with something like ceremony. "This stays," I said aloud. "Not as a trophy, as an index." I wrote a new letter then, not to myself this time, but to whoever finds these papers after I'm gone. Do you write those letters? They are deliciously arrogant, I admit. They assume a reader. I wrote that I had been a father who learned late, and a husband who learned later, and a man who finally believed that dignity didn't require secrecy. I wrote that age hadn't made me kinder. It had made me slower, which sometimes looks the same. I wrote that forgiveness is a good screwdriver, never the whole toolbox. In the morning, I took the L to 79th. Don't scold me. I wanted to return to accurate refunds and see if the heir still remembered my threat. The woman in the leopard coat was there, filing her nails into obedient ovals. "Returns?" she asked. "No," I said. "Deposits." She raised one eyebrow. "Funniest thing on this block," she said, echoing Tobin from days ago. "You looking for the boy?" "I'm looking for the men," I said. "Wrong week. They've already reinvented themselves," she said, with the fatigue of an oracle. "Tell them," I said, leaning just enough to give the sentence a spine. "If they text my house again, I'll take their paper and turn it into scholarships with their names on the plaques. The kind with bad lighting. They won't survive the irony." She laughed, a real one, and the sound made two men in the back glance up. "You're a menace, Mr. Harris," she said. "I'm retired," I said. "This is a hobby." On the way home, I stopped at the church on Cottage Grove I never quite joined. The doors were unlocked. The sanctuary smelled like wood, wax, and last Sunday's attempt. I sat in the back pew and listed the people I was willing to disappoint to keep the peace I had begun to acquire. A short list, mercifully, myself, topped it. "Isn't that wrong?" I asked the white air, and the stained glass warrior saint looked ready to argue. I let him win for once. When I returned to our block, a single sheet of paper waited on the front stoop, pinned by a pebble that tried too hard to be my stone. On the paper, a printed photograph of me in the warehouse, pen in hand, Ethan's face half turned, my signature fresh and unwisely bold. Below it, in ink, "Deals made in the dark count double in daylight." I looked up and down the street. Nothing moved, except a woman in a red hat walking a dog that had no quarrel with anyone. I folded the page. I didn't show it to Mindy yet, not because I wanted to keep secrets, but because I wanted to decide what it meant before the house had to carry it. Self-revelation is ugly if you peel it too fast. Here's mine. In a sentence, I'd prefer you not quote back to me later. I like danger if I get to narrate it. I like being the one who turns a threat into a paragraph that ends well. That's vanity. That's also craft. I will try to keep both on a leash. That night, I placed the photograph under the stone with the rest evidence of a man making shapes with his days. Then I slept 9 hours, dreamless, the kind of sleep my mother would call honest. I woke to a text from Kaisha. Heard rumor of a signature party on 90. Want to tell me now or after I file the thing that keeps you from being sued? I grinned, wrote back coffee, and she shot back the name of a cafe I liked because the chairs were kind to old knees. We would talk. We would arrange the legal to fit around the moral. I would learn to speak of what I did without apologizing for being in the story. And you still with me? You will permit one more chapter, because if this was the accounting, the last part is the disbursement, where the money goes. Where the letters end up, where the house returns to being itself. A final complication, because the universe refuses a neat ledger. As I put on my coat, the doorbell rang. Not the timid taps of a neighbor borrowing sugar, not the thudding announcement of a debt collector. A single, courteous chime. When I opened it, a courier stood with a certified envelope addressed to me in a hand I recognized now without flinching. Ethan's. Inside, a cashier's check for a small amount. A note. First installment. You were right about the wheel. Let me try to walk. Would you have believed it? Would you cash it? I did neither. I set it on the table under the stone and let it learn the weight of my house. Then I turned toward the door. Coffee with Kaisha, a plan for daylight. A daughter warming her hands around a mug in a kitchen that finally felt like it remembered our names. And the smallest Cliff waiting, because the back of the note held a line written in someone else's hand. Careful, precise, almost my daughter's. Don't forget, you promised to forgive me last. I didn't cash the check. Not because I didn't need the money. The furnace was coughing again. The roof had been flirting with collapse for 2 winters. But because cashing it would have made forgiveness transactional, and I've already sold enough of my life by the pound. I left it on the kitchen table, under the same stone that has become my family's unofficial archive of sins and second chances. Sometimes, when the light hits it just right, the marble glints gold over the paper. Redemption in the morning sun, if you want to be poetic. I do. A week passed before anything else moved. Chicago thawed a little, enough to show the dirt that winter had been hiding. I busied myself with ordinary repairs, oiling the door hinges, rehanging the crooked frame of Natalie's graduation photo, fixing the latch on the shed. These are the things that make an old man feel sovereign. The phone barely rang, and that was mercy. Mindy took to reading again. Big, messy novels she'd abandoned when life got too noisy. Natalie spent her days half at home, half at her friend Serena's apartment, trying to make decisions without the ghost of Ethan's voice echoing them back. She spoke of lawyers and paperwork in fragments. I didn't pry. You learn, with daughters, that questions can feel like ownership. I just made sure the house smelled of coffee and that the porch light was always on when she came home. One evening, she handed me a thick envelope. Divorce papers, she said. Her tone was half apology, half triumph. He signed everything. No fight. Did he? I asked quietly. She nodded. Kaisha helped. She said the statement you signed made it easier. The one from the warehouse. I smiled without meaning to. I knew she'd find a way to make my bad decisions legal. He also sent you that check, she said, nodding at the table. You saw it? Yes. You going to cash it? No. She stared at me. Why? Because forgiveness shouldn't earn interest. That made her laugh, and in that sound, I recognized the child she used to be, the one who believed every joke I told was written just for her. We held a small dinner the night she moved her things back in. Mindy cooked too much, of course. The house smelled like rosemary in relief. It was the first time in years the 3 of us ate without an unspoken name at the table. We even opened the good wine, the bottle that had been waiting for the right occasion. Toasts were made, simple ones. To starting over, Natalie said. To endings that end well enough, I added. Mindy lifted her glass. To quiet mornings and unplanned evenings. The clink of glass was gentler than any prayer I've heard. After dinner, Natalie went upstairs to unpack. Mindy and I lingered by the sink, washing dishes side by side, our rhythm so practiced it felt choreographed. Outside, snow began again, just enough to remind the world of its imperfections. You know, Mindy said, rinsing a plate. I half expected him to show up tonight. So did I admitted. But I think he's finally learning to disappear gracefully. Do you trust him? No, but I trust us. She dried her hands, looked at me, and said, You should write that down. And I did. The next morning, I started writing again. Letters, as I'd promised myself. Not to Natalie this time, not even to Ethan. To whoever I used to be. To the man who thought being needed was the same as being loved. I told him about silence that healed instead of punished. About daughters who return not because you deserve it, but because they ran out of other places to stand. I told him about how forgiveness is quiet work. Less like thunder, more like shoveling snow. Repetitive, cold, necessary. I filled one page, then another. When I was done, I placed them with the others in the windowsill hollow beneath the old stone. The archive was growing. The forged letter, the confession pad from the motel, the photograph from the warehouse, Ethan's check. Each item a scar, tidy and labeled. At noon, Kaisha called. "You alive?" she said by way of greeting. "Barely," I said. "And legally cleaner than ever." "I saw the divorce decree," she said. "You did good, Michael." "I didn't do it," I said. "I just stopped making it worse." She chuckled. "That counts as progress. You ever think about writing this down? Could make a book." "I already am," I said. "One letter at a time. Send me a copy when you stop confessing," she said, then hung up. Weeks slipped by. Chicago warmed, then lied about it, then warmed again. Natalie got a job at an accounting firm downtown. Poetic, considering the scholarship fund I'd started in my mother's name. She didn't know about it yet. Some gifts need to find the recipient slowly. Sometimes I'd catch her staring out the window in the evenings, eyes distant, phone untouched. Healing has a shape, mostly stillness. She would see me watching and smile, thinking about the past. She'd say, "Good," I'd answer. "It's the only way to make it smaller." One night, she asked something that took the air out of the room. "Dad, if he called and said he needed help again, would you answer?" I thought about it. Really thought. "Yes," I said finally. "But I'd start by asking what kind of help he means." She nodded. "I think I would too." It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. A month later, the mail brought something strange. A small brown package, no return address, postmarked from Gary, Indiana. Inside was a book, a beginner's guide to honest living. A joke, surely. Tucked between the pages was a note in Ethan's hand. "You were right. The wheel stops if you let it rust. I'm learning to walk." I showed it to Natalie. She read it twice, then set it down carefully, as though it were made of glass. "He's trying," she said. "Maybe," I said. "But so am I. Let's give him that much." She smiled faintly. "You've changed." "No," I said. "I've just started listening to the right silences. Life after drama isn't decently ordinary. I go to the hardware store on Wednesdays, buy screws I don't need just to talk to the cashier who calls me sir, with respect instead of pity. Mindy has taken up watercolor painting. She says she likes making mistakes that look like art. Natalie comes home late from work, hair smelling faintly of cold air and office coffee. We eat together more nights than not. And sometimes, when the light falls a certain way, I catch my reflection in the window, the ghost of an older man looking back. I nod to him. We've made our peace. One evening in early spring, Natalie came to me with an envelope. Inside was a check, larger than the first, made out to Eliza Harris Foundation. I didn't ask where it came from. I didn't need to. The memo line reads simply, "Installment 2. I smiled. "Looks like rust doesn't stick if you keep moving." "What are you going to do with it?" she asked. "Put it to work," I said. "Maybe fund another scholarship. Maybe fix the roof. Maybe both." She laughed. "That's very you." "And you," I said, "are finally very you." She hugged me then, sudden, fierce, the kind of embrace that arrives with no warning and no ceremony. I felt her heartbeat through my shirt, steady and alive. It was the sound I'd been chasing for 5 years. That night, when everyone had gone to bed, I stood in the kitchen alone. The city outside buzzed with its restless mercy. I took the old letter out one last time, smoothed its creases, read the words that had once wrecked me. "Dad, I need money for emergency surgery. Please don't tell anyone." The ink had faded, the desperation drained. It was just paper now. I smiled, not at the lie, but at the distance between then and now. Then I placed it back under the stone, whispered a quiet thank you to the ghost of the man who once believed it, and turned out the light. It's a strange thing, peace. You don't notice it arrive. You notice the absence of argument. You notice the house breathing evenly, the creak of old wood that isn't complaint, but continuity. You notice that silence, once your enemy, now feels like company. Chicago is still cold, but the cold feels earned. The streets shine with thawed hope. And in this small house on South Shore, there's laughter again. Hesitant at first, then full. I sit by the window most mornings, coffee in hand, watching the sun crawl across the floor toward the stone paperweight, the quiet monument to everything we survived. I think about all the letters I've written, all the truths I didn't need to send. And I understand now, forgiveness isn't a gift you give once. It's the daily maintenance of love. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.